November 2025 has shown that the Russian rear is becoming an active battlefield. Three events inside of Russia struck the same nerve within a matter of days. First, a Ukrainian FP1 drone destroyed a Russian Mi-8 helicopter deep inside of Russia's Rostov Oblast. Secondly, Ukrainian drones set transformers ablaze at the Shatura power plant near Moscow. And third, Russian railway troops sabotaged their own electric locomotive carrying military cargo in Russia's Rostov-on-Don. These incidences show that this war is no longer confined to the front line. The question is no longer who holds trenches. The question is whether Russia can defend its airspace, its power grid, and its logistics on its own soil. Helicopters, power plants, and military trains inside of Russia are now targets, and that reality is terrifying the Kremlin. The Kremlin now must protect the very infrastructure that allows it to wage war. My name is Jason Smart. I'm a special correspondent for the Kiev Post and a national security advisor. Today, Russia is having yet new problems, more problems, and they are compounding. But the problems that we're seeing now are inside of Russia, and that's the incredible part. Increasingly, this war is being fought on Russia's own land. So let's dive into this. Let's look at what's been going on and what it all means together. But just one small favor before we do that. As you know, these events are not going to be covered in the Russian news, and unfortunately, even the Western press rarely picks up on them. So help us to get the truth to more people. This channel exists only for one reason: to help get out the truth about Ukraine and its fight for freedom, and what's really happening here on the ground in Ukraine, and what's really happening inside of Russia. You can do that by simply liking this video, subscribing to this channel, and considering becoming a channel member today. And please do leave your comments below. And just one last thing before we go ahead, I almost forgot to mention, we just gave more drones to the Ukrainian soldiers, and the soldiers of the 67th would like to thank you for your support.
Dear partners at United Unmanned Systems and Jason J. Smart, we are the soldiers of the 67th Mechanized Brigade Air Defense Unit, speaking directly to you to express our profound gratitude. We have just received the latest shipment of 22 absolutely crucial air defense drones. These drones are not just equipment, they are indispensable assets in our daily mission. Their proven effectiveness allows us to continuously and successfully protect the Ukrainian sky from Russian aerial threats. Thank you for your unwavering support. Your commitment saves lives and helps secure our freedom. Glory to Ukraine! Slava Ukraini! Героям слава!
Thank you, everyone who has helped us to get more drones that will save the lives of Ukrainian soldiers. Please see the first comment below of how you too can make a contribution via PayPal or via bank transfer. Any currency is accepted. So the first indicator of this shift comes from the skies of Rostov, where the illusion of rear area safety has collapsed totally. Ukrainian Special Operations Forces released scope footage from a long-range FP1 drone operating inside the country. The Mi-8 helicopter sat in the crosshairs, and a second later, it was destroyed over Russian soil. Ukrainian command stressed that this was a planned deep strike, and not an accident, not by luck. Russian planners had assumed rear area helicopter routes were going to be safe, but today, that assumption is gone. And the Mi-8, it serves as the backbone for the Soviet and then now today Russian forces, and it's been that way since the 1960s. It carried troops in Afghanistan, in Chechnya, and in Syria, and now across occupied Ukrainian territories and on the Russian border regions. Modern variants of this cost several $1 million and often carry officers and special forces. Losing one so far from the front lines signals that rear area aviation can now be hunted. The historical context is also pretty interesting. In the past, Moscow accepted that helicopter losses were going to happen on the front lines, but it never worried about what would happen in its rear. The Rostov strike eliminates that psychological buffer. If helicopters are not safe over Rostov, Russia, then no longer are they safe anywhere in Russia. The technical implications are also pretty interesting. The FP1 drone, it proved it can navigate, strike, and guide itself over long distances. It hit an airborne target, demonstrating a new form of deep denial zone. Russian pilots will now fly lower and faster to survive. This increases fatigue, accident rates, and mechanical strain. Every air defense system pulled back to protect Rostov is one less system that is at the front. One successful strike forces changes in routes, posture, and resource allocation. A single drone has altered today how Russian pilots think about flying through their own skies. But at the same time, as the air rear showed its vulnerability, the energy rear also followed. We saw, in fact, an attack within Russia, close to Moscow. The Shatura Vladimir Lenin State District Power Plant is one of Russia's oldest and most important stations. Built in 1925, it now runs primarily on natural gas. It has 1,500 megawatts of installed capacity. It supports electricity and heat for the entire Moscow region. But we just saw how Ukrainian drones hit its high voltage transformers. The impact triggered explosions and a large fire that is visible across the region. Russian reactions, of course, were not surprising. Russian and Ukrainian Telegram channels, supported by OSINT groups, geolocated the strike to the Shatura facility. Now, Moscow acknowledged that there had been a large fire, but insisted that the grid was stable. The Ministry of Defense claimed that it had shot down 75 drones. 2 drones were reportedly shot down near Moscow. Zhukovsky Airport in Russia remains suspended from all operations. All evidence at this point points to the fact that this strike was done thanks to Ukrainian drones. This is yet one more strike close to the capital, a capital where the people are incredibly unsure of what will come tomorrow because their government has failed to protect them. And as they're waging war against Ukraine, trying to destroy the electricity in this country, we see today the Russians cannot be so sure themselves if tomorrow the lights will come on. But the Shaturo's transformer yard is strategically sensitive. Large transformers are custom built, oil filled, and extremely difficult to replace under the current sanctions. So even if turbines survive, losing step up transformers, that will cripple the output. Without them, electricity cannot be transmitted at grid voltage. Railways, defense plants, command centers, radar sites, air defense batteries, they all rely on this flow. So a strike on a transformer yard disrupts multiple military and civilian systems all at once. History shows us something very interesting now. History shows why power grids become wartime targets. In World War II, major air campaigns sought to knock out power and industrial capacity. In Serbia and Iraq, NATO repeated the model of blackout, repair, and exhaustion. The aim is not total destruction, but repeated operational strain. Ukraine is achieving this with drones instead of bombers. The political message is also quite clear. Russia spent 2 winters trying to freeze Ukrainian cities. Now, a major power plant near Moscow is burning on camera. Flames near the capital puncture the entire myth of being a protected elite zone, a zone that was out of reach of the Ukrainians. Russian citizens see now that the war has come to them. It is in their very own regions. The Kremlin cannot claim comfort at home while making Ukrainians suffer. So when transformers burn near Moscow, Russian elites learn the war has reached their address. But the economic pressure at this point, it compounds this. Sanctions have already reduced Russia's energy revenues. War spending is rising as equipment losses are mounting. Every damaged power node demands costly repairs through intermediaries. The Kremlin must choose between repairing the rear or funding offensive capabilities. Authoritarian regimes often misallocate resources under long war strain. Money spent defending the rear is money lost everywhere else. As the power grid showed cracks, Russia's logistics system revealed something even more dangerous: the corrosion of loyalty inside the machinery that keeps the war running. ATESH partisans reported that embedded agents within Russian railway troops sabotaged an electric locomotive in Rostov-on-Don. Visual material supports what was said. In fact, the locomotive was transporting military cargo. Rostov is the distribution hub for Russia's southern and eastern military districts. Damaging a locomotive here strikes the arteries that feed the front. The identity of the saboteurs matters. It's very important to note because this was not done by Ukrainian commandos. They were uniformed Russian railway troops. They complained publicly that their special operation payments were being delayed. Some said it had been withheld. They said the sabotage was revenge against the regime that had abandoned them. This is insider action driven by resentment and economic grievance. And when support troops start burning their own assets, discipline is obviously beginning to collapse within the system. When railway troops blow up their own train, the regime faces a problem that no tank can fix. Now, historical precedents underline this risk. In World War II, Soviet partisan troops blew up German trains and bridges, forcing diversions of manpower. In late Soviet unrest, transport bottlenecks exposed the regime's fragility. But in Chechnya, we saw something else. Insurgents there repeatedly hit rail lines and convoys, imposing constant uncertainty. Russia's modern army depends heavily on rail because its trucks, logistics, it's a mess. They really can't operate without rail. More than 70% of all of Russian logistics happen via rail. Interruptions, they create ammunition shortages, fuel gaps, and delayed troop rotations. Today's difference, though, is critical. The threat is internal, not external. Insiders know schedules, cargo, choke points. Senior officers must now treat their own logistics personnel as potential risk. They must increase counterintelligence and loyalty screening. Each layer slows the entire system. Leadership paranoia grows as commanders wonder who might next turn on them. Russian history reinforces this danger. During World War I, rail failures helped drive the Tsarist regimes towards collapse. In Afghanistan, supply line strain eroded morale. Long wars corrode logistical systems from within. The Rostov sabotage shows that coercion has reached the core. The Russian supply machine is being attacked by its own components. When all three signals are placed side by side, the emerging pattern becomes clear. It's impossible for Moscow to ignore. Ukraine can now destroy military assets deep inside of Russia with inexpensive drones. It can strike critical energy infrastructure near Moscow. Russian personnel inside the logistics chain are willing to sabotage Russian military trains. The conflict has become a multi vector pressure campaign against Russia's rear. For Russian planners, this creates impossible trade offs. Air defenses must be pulled back from the front to protect rear corridors. More units must guard power installations near Moscow. Security services must monitor railway troops and other supply units. Emergency budgets must now include grid repairs and rail replacements. Every ruble that is spent fortifying the rear is a ruble that is lost on the front. Russia's traditional advantage in strategic depth is shrinking under cheap, asymmetric pressure. For Ukraine, this is deliberate strategy, not just random harassment. Kyiv cannot match Russia's mass in terms of aircraft or artillery, but it can impose direct cost on Russia trying to engage in war. It can impose distributed cost across all of Russia's interior. Each drone strike widens the defensive perimeter that Moscow must now protect. Each act of sabotage erodes trust inside the chain of command. Over time, Russia must decide which vulnerabilities it can live with. That decision defines long war strain in an overextended state. Information affects and accelerates this process. Videos of the helicopter strike spread across Russian social media. Footage of the Shatura fire, it weakens the image of the capital being untouchable. Statements from the rail saboteurs show the internal fractures. Authoritarian systems depend on the appearance of control, but when the appearance fails, elites start to hedge their bets. Regions start to feel delays, and the citizens start to have doubts. A regime that promised order begins to look like, in fact, it is losing its grip. History shows now these things typically end, and it's not good for Russia, because late Imperial Russia, it mixed battlefield defeats with shortages and strikes. The late Soviet era mixed economic stagnation with a draining war in Afghanistan. States seldom collapse from only one blow. Typically, they erode when the rear becomes insecure and confidence in leadership disappears. Today's war is not yet at that threshold, but the direction is very clear. Drones have already hit oil depots, air bases, and command posts, and they are now reaching helicopters, power plants, all inside of Russia. Partisans simultaneously are torching locomotives in critical hubs. Energy revenues are shrinking under sanctions and discounts. The budget is dominated by military and security spending. The buffer between the war and daily Russian life is becoming ever more thin. The implication for the Western governments is very clear: support Ukraine to use long range drones and to attack systems within Russia. Affordable system hits are excellent for Ukraine and excellent for the West. The Kremlin must either thin its defenses or accept that it will continue to be damaged. Internal resistance is strengthened when the regime appears vulnerable. But the implication for the average Russian citizen is unavoidable. The war is no longer limited to Donetsk or Zaporizhia. A helicopter has been destroyed over Rostov, Russia. A power plant has burned near Moscow. A locomotive has been blown up by its own crew. The shield around normal Russian life is beginning to crack. And the assessment is pretty clear. The Mi 8 strike, the Shatura fire, the Rostov sabotage, all of these things combined are just one phase of what's to come. The war is moving into Russia's rear in a consistent, expanding pattern. Each strike and each insider action forces the Kremlin to defend a wider perimeter with very finite tools. And in past conflicts, expanding defensive obligations have helped break overstretched empires. Whether Moscow can adapt without exposing deeper weaknesses is, at this point, quite uncertain. What is certain, however, is that the Russian rear is becoming more dangerous for the regime than for its enemies. Thank you for watching. Please like this video. Please subscribe to this channel and help us reach 300,000 subscribers. And consider becoming a channel member today. And do leave your comments below. I love reading them. And one last thing. When you have the video options pop up on the screen, in just a second, please click one of them. It really helps us with the algorithms so this video reaches more people. As always, thank you for supporting Ukraine.